You're listening to Real Folk with me, Jo Burke.
Hello, John Fleming, and welcome to Real Folk.
Real Folk in cyberspace.
Real Folk in cyberspace. This is a Zoom Real Folk, not a Custard HQ one, not a pub garden or a hotel garden. It's a Zoom one, so apologies if there's any inning and outing.
Real Folk. Hey.
Exactly. So I'll be honest. Let's be honest with our listener. We did do this in... Sorry?
Who are you?
Exactly. So we did, John and I actually tried to record this last week in a hotel, and the pub garden was so noisy that when I got home, the recording was irretrievable, really. And it was also very, very windy. It's very gusty, wasn't it, John?
Well, I was very windy.
So I'll share the picture. We've got a lovely picture of the two of us in there. But so this, this actual interview is taking place via the medium of Zoom. So I wanted to start with, you've just been up to Edinburgh, which didn't have the festival. So how did you find that? Because that's probably the first year you've been up in August without a festival taking part.
Just got on the train, went off. There it was at the end. It was okay. I've been going up to Edinburgh since I was about an embryo, maybe, because my father had a very rich aunt who lived in Edinburgh. And so obviously every year we went up to see her and show our love and concern for her. She never left us any money, but and so I've been going up to Edinburgh every year since seriously since I was an embryo. And I started going to the film festival in the earlier mid-70s, because I'm that old. In my mid to late 70s, and then the Fringe in the 80s, and then I sort of discovered the comedy Fringe in the mid 80s, and I've been going up ever since then.
Ever since then.
Edinburgh felt like, so I know what an ordinary Edinburgh feels like without the Fringe. So it felt like an ordinary Edinburgh without the Fringe, and with fewer tourists, because of course international travel's gone down. So.
Exactly.
It was just Edinburgh, really. Very nice, quieter.
And you're a people might not gather because the accent is minimal, if they're at all. You are actually Scottish by.
I am. By what? By hell.
By Jove. But was it Morningside? Were you born? No, where were you born?
If only I could be born in Morningside, somewhere posh like that. No, I was born in Campbelltown, which is a fishing town on the west coast of Scotland, and then we moved to until I was 3, and then when I was 3, not when we were 3, when I was 3, we moved to Aberdeen, which is a fishing town in the northeast of Scotland, and then when I was 8, I moved down to Ilford in Essex, which is theoretically in Essex, but actually in East London. It's a sort of spit out of East London, which is very down market. So
yeah. So what was that? Must have been a culture shock.
Culture. Have you been to Ilford?
Good one. Yeah.
It wasn't even Ilford. It was Seven Kings, which is part of Ilford. It's just the lower part of Ilford. Not a culture shock, I don't think. At least we're all British and all that. The accents were a bit odd, but then my accent was a bit odd too. I came from Aberdeen. Aberdeen.
So how did you find school suddenly, a little young Scots boy suddenly thrown into the Essex?
Well, that's a shrewder question, you think, because I think that meant that I didn't follow on from some subjects, but did for others. So I think it was normal at that time for people coming from Scotland, it happened to my cousin as well, to be put forward a year when we came down to England, because the English are thick as shit. And so when I did mathematics, I went from learning addition to learning division. So I missed subtraction and multiplication because they were a year on from me, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
So I missed it anyway. That makes no sense at all. Do you hear that back? But anyway, that's true. So on factual subjects, I missed a year because I got put forward and I hadn't had that year's learning in those subjects. But on arty subjects, it didn't actually matter. And history didn't really matter because you just looked at a different part of history. It's all history. But mathematics and things like that and scientific subjects, I was less good at, I think, because I had to catch up for a year.
Yeah.
I was never particularly good at mathematics. It just didn't add up. Yeah.
Me either. And that's not from missing a year. I was at all the years. So what's your real passion? Is it movies? Is it comedy? Or is it
tiramisu?
Tiramisu. Well, why not? Yeah, I'm a cheesecake person myself. I'm not so keen on tiramisu.
Well, I mean, you asked me the last failed interview. What did I think of myself as? And when in the early days when we had blue passports and you had to write your occupation in it, I put down writer. So, and I always wanted to be a writer when I was a kid. So probably a writer, but I'm a good editor, really.
Right. So what inspired you as a kid? If you wanted to be a writer, and I know what that feels like because that's kind of where I started and what I wanted to always be as well. And I just can remember thinking that the writing and the acting were sort of hand in hand, and if you could do both, then you had so much freedom because you had the written word and the chance to perform it as well. So were you inspired by any particular writer as a kid that made you read that and thought, oh my goodness, I just need to be a writer?
Can I just congratulate you for actually managed to leap in there, because I as mentioned before off there, I ramble on, and there's no way to edit. That's the trouble. I can't be editing. Words tumble into other words with no gaps for editing. As I know about editing. When I was a kid, I read widely. I can no longer read, but there we go. That's another matter.
Why not? Why do you say that?
I was hit by a truck in 1991, when I was standing on the pavement.
Really?
Really? Would I lie to you?
Who knows?
Who knows? But getting back to childhood. I
want to hear about the truck. How did you get hit by a truck, John? I didn't know that.
I was going down to. It was a Saturday, and it was. It must have been about 11:45 or something, because I was going down to the post box to post a letter before the 12 o'clock delivery to someone I'd met at Anglia Television. I was no longer at Anglia Television, and so I was rushing down to do the post box, and I was standing perfectly legally and perfectly politely on the pavement, and this cab of a lorry came round past me from the right, and I don't remember this. This is what happened, but I don't remember it. I don't remember anything ever. I turned around to see when it would be clear, and I turned into the overhang. If you can imagine the cab, and then the rectangular truck behind it is wider than the cab.
Yes.
So I turned into the corner of the metal steel truck itself, and I got thrown backwards. My collarbone, my collarbone was pulverized in 3 places.
Oh.
One of them on the pavement, and I fell backwards. And as I fell backwards, there was a low wall of about 9 inches high, 9 inches high, with a sharp edge. And as I fell back, the back of my head hit the corner of the wall. So my shoulder was hit by the truck with a sharp edge. My back of my head was hit by the sharp edge of the wall, and so I got concussion. Well, and I was also bashed around, and basically the hospital was inefficient, and I was never treated properly after I was thrown out of hospital after a week. And so I got concussion for about 9 months or something. It was drifting. I used to think I was okay, then I wasn't. I was okay, then I wasn't. But it was the concussion. And I used to come home. I could work. When I came home from work, I would sort of sit in front of the TV and watch it. I wasn't really taking anything in. If I tried to read a newspaper column, I'd get about one paragraph in, and it was as if my mind would go out of focus. I couldn't mentally focus. I could visually focus, but I couldn't mentally focus on what was on the page, and therefore I couldn't comprehend what was on the page. So it was like a flashback to senility, which I've now reached.
Oh my goodness.
And so that's never really gone. So I can't read books anymore. I can write books, but I can't read them.
Oh.
And I can write books, I think, because you write books on a small computer screen, and there's a limited amount of visual information coming into your brain. Now, I in theory, I should be able to read Kindles and things like that, but I've never really particularly tried. But I can't read a book. It's probably mental. If I pick up a book and it's got 395 pages, I can get a certain amount. I'm getting 2 or 3 pages in, but then it was as if my mind again goes into defocus mode and I can't read it.
So interesting. That must have been a really awful thing for somebody that makes their living writing and it's their passion.
I've written a book with Martin Scorsese. Never met him.
Have you really?
Well, it was Anatomy of the Movies, and I was there to write about science fiction because I wrote about science fiction for magazines, and he wrote about producing movies, and who else was in? It was Donald Sutherland about acting, and all top people.
Amazing. Right. So did you meet all those guys and collaborate, or did you all just do your own bits?
No. So David Perry, who was film editor of Time Out, just got in touch with all these people, and they all did it for him. And I was supposed to do science fiction, but then the bloke who was supposed to do stunting discovered he couldn't really write the chapter. He had the information, so he gave me the rough things he was going to do, and then I put those into order and half wrote my own chapter. And then David Perry didn't have time to do some other chapter, and I did a third chapter. So I did 3 chapters. So
and what's that book called?
Martin Scorsese, lazy bastard. I did 1 chapter, me 3 chapters, no problem. Anatomy of the Movies, out of print. It was published by, rather strangely, it was published by W.H. Smith in this country. And it was published by Macmillan in North America. Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
It's a very good book.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. It sounds really good.
Obviously, my chapter on science fiction obviously
is the best.
Out of date, because I was saying things like, well, no one values science fiction anymore. A couple of years later or something, Star Wars came along.
Oh, changed everything. Everything. Well, that's amazing.
Going back to your original question, when I was a kid, I used to read widely. I admired George Orwell. Because George Orwell was a very clear writer. He's an immensely vivid writer.
Yeah.
Now, 1984 is shit because it's an awful novel because the female character is rubbish and the male character is pretty rubbish. But it's a great book. It's a wonderful book. A wonderful, wonderful book. But because it's very clear, and the best thing about it is the appendix is wonderful about newspeak, the language. But I always wanted to be as clear a writer as George Orwell. And then when I was at college at the Regent Street Poly, one of the things we had to do was English, and we had to. That's irrelevant. One of the things we had to do at the end of, I think, the first term or the second term was we had to create something. So it could be an album of songs, it could be a book of poetry, it could be a novel, it could be whatever. And I decided to write the novel. So I wrote a novel, and it was shit. But I thought, well, if I wrote 2 more, then the third one or maybe the fourth one would be okay. The second one would be shit as well. But I thought I could write novels.
Just keep writing them until you get to one. Yeah,
I could write a novel because I can do the length and all that. So I can write novels, but it actually stopped me writing a novel. That and the fact that I had to write an essay on George Eliot's Middlemarch,
right?
And it's the only argument I know for studying literature in any form, because it wasn't until I actually wrote the essay on Middlemarch I realised how clever it was. She has, I think it's 3 groups of 2 people. There are 3 couples, so there are 6 people, and none of them are the same at the end of the book as they were at the beginning of the book, because what's happened in the book has changed their characters. And if you sit down normally, you say, what in this famous book, in Charles Dickens, what sort of person is this? And you can say, oh, he's X, Y, or Z. In Middlemarch, you can't say that because the person at the beginning is a different psychological
progression.
Again, and I thought, I'll never write a better book than that. Bloody hell! But it was mostly the fact I thought. I don't know. I'd got it out of the bee out of my bonnet or something. I thought, well, I've written a novel. It was shit, but I'm not. Yeah, I don't feel the urge to write. I don't need to prove to myself that I can write a novel. I think I can write a novel. So that's egocentric, but you know.
Well, it isn't. I mean, and I think.
I knew it was shit, and I knew the next one would be shit, and possibly a third one, but I knew I could at some point write a decent novel. I'm not really a writer, I'm an editor. What I'm good at is rearranging things and making them work. So I interviewed Terry Nation, who invented the Daleks, and I interviewed Nigel Neal, who did Quatermass, which is one of the greatest things I've ever seen in my life. And I interviewed Brian Clemens, who was involved in the Avengers and things like that. And each of those people, when I was interviewing them, would just spew off wonderful plot lines off the top of their heads to explain something. Oh, an example would be, and then they do this plot line. You think, bloody hell, how did they do that? And I haven't got that ability to spew out, 15 original plots in the next 4 minutes. I can't do that.
But if somebody has, you can help them to make it more succinct and...
Yeah. So if someone tells me the rough outline, then I can make it work. Or if someone's doing it, I can help them to make it work, so I can edit. And that goes to visuals. So I was a promotion trailer maker. So if you give me a 2.5 hour film, I can make 20 seconds. I can quickly make 20 seconds out of it. It's appealing and explain the plot because I'm an editor. And I think that goes back to when I was a kid. I was really, really, really interested in jigsaws. I love jigsaws, and I've got a jigsaw mind. So you can give me 450 pieces or something, and I can make a picture out of it.
I love that. I've got a jigsaw mind. That's amazing. Yeah. That's such a good analogy, though, isn't it, for somebody that edits or does things, because you've got all, like you said, you've got these potentially thousands of jigsaw pieces. Yeah. And, well, in a jigsaw, there is only one way they all fit together. But when you're editing, there's multiple ways you can fit those jigsaw pieces together. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there is no right way to do anything. That you can put it together in 5,000 ways. I mean, I got criticised at college once because I was doing the same sort of essay over and over again, which was I would read everything about the subject, and then I would, in order to make my argument for the essay, I would do quotes all over the place from these sources, and the result was I had. An essay was 7/8 quotes and then 1/8 me, and it was. I put it together in the way that I felt was communicating my thoughts. But I was said, John, write yourself, do it yourself.
Well, that's kind of it's interesting you should say that, because that's kind of what I did with this interview when I sort of binned the first version. And I said, quite honestly, I contacted you and I said, look, John, I don't feel like we've discussed you at all. And I'm so glad we did, because already, I've found out so much more about your background and why you do what you do and your sort of early career and what you got up to and what led you to be where you are now. And what I felt we'd missed from the first interview is really the story of your friendship, because I don't know whether you feel that this is true, but a lot of guys tend to not have very strong bonds with one other guy. Women tend to have friends and lots of friends, but the blokes tend to be a little bit more acquaintancy. Do you find? And I just felt like the story of you and Malcolm was, I don't know how you met. I know that you were friends, and I know that you set up all these awards posthumously, but I don't know how you met or how that friendship came about, how long it was for. Yeah, I would just love to know more about that, really.
How much are you going to pay me? Well, no, you're absolutely right. As far as I'm concerned, you're absolutely right, because I don't have male friends. I never had male friends.
But that's not unusual, is it?
No, I'm not interested in men. I don't just mean sexually. I'm just not interested in men. Women, if a woman comes to me and says, "Oh, I've had this terrible time," I say, "Oh God," and I feel very protective. If a man comes to me and says, "I've had a terrible time," I think, "Oh, fuck off, just sort it out." And so I've never. Well, also I don't drink. But I don't bond with men particularly. So I never bonded with Malcolm, not because he was him. He's very nice, but I just don't bond with men. So I would say I've got five friends, arguably, and they're all women, because I'm just not interested in men psychologically.
And has that always been the case?
Yes. I mean, I might have gone back to childhood where when I came down to Ilford. I was 8 years old, and that's halfway through the primary school. So all the bonds and friendships had been made by the other people halfway through already.
So it's a tough time coming as a newbie.
Yeah, and so I wasn't bullied or anything, but it meant that I wasn't making friends from the start, and also geographically, no one lived near me. So I had little chums in school, but no one lived near me from my year or my class, so I didn't meet them out of school really, and so that I'm probably quite gregarious, but I wasn't in primary school or secondary school because again that was a geographical thing. Because it was it was a boys' school in secondary thing, probably more solitary than gregarious, whereas naturally I'm probably more gregarious than solitary.
And it's interesting that you went to boys' schools, because usually guys that went to, or actually women as well, if you've been to a single-sex school, actually whatever, if it's a girls' school, you tend to feel awkward around men and vice versa. So I find it interesting that you had a male school upbringing and yet your preference is for female friends. Usually it's the other way round when you speak to people, that they normally feel more comfortable in what was their old school environment, basically.
I don't know. I mean, I think I'm just interested more in talking with women and talking with men. And it's possibly because men are more simple. Well, Janie Godley, the Scottish comedian, had some line in one of her shows, something to the effect of the difference between men and women was like if a man's emotions and man's thoughts and so on were like a light switch. You switched them on, you switched them off. A woman is like a Rubik's Cube.
That's such a good analogy. Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of truth in that. And therefore, men are not as interesting to me as women. Although it would have been better if I was interested in more simple people, maybe. So there you go.
You're listening to Real Folk with me, Jo Burke. This would ordinarily be an advertising break, but as I don't yet have an advertiser, why not check out standingoncustard.com, where you can buy all 4 of my children's books, plus my adult comedy book about online dating, all delivered free and signed by me. standingoncustard.com. Back to the show.
So Malcolm. I met Malcolm. We couldn't quite remember how we met. We couldn't remember when we met. I was doing either Game for a Laugh or Surprise, Surprise for London Weekend, which were real people shows. And from Tiswas days, I got typed as Finding Bizarre Acts. And they were usually sort of bizarre, real people acts. So some bloke with no life in the middle of nowhere in the provinces, and to keep himself sane, he did wild things. Anyway, so I was Mr. Eccentric, and so inevitably in 85, 86 round about then, either for Game for a Laugh or Surprise, Surprise, I went to see Malcolm at the Tunnel because he ran the Tunnel Palladium, which was a club in Dartford. But also he managed and mentored and advised all sorts of comics. And I went to see him for, I think, a couple of acts that he had. I can't remember who they were. And so that's how we first met. And then we sort of just got to know each other. And then I ended up working at Noel Gay Television, named after, I should point out, a songwriter, Noel Gay Television. And I was working on... I had an interview to be employed in the light entertainment department, BSB, the precursor of B Sky B, different company. And usually I got it because I usually didn't get interviews because you can hear how I'm not someone you would employ. If you hear me talking, you wouldn't employ me. And so a couple of times I was rejected for interviews, and 6 months later people phoned me up and said, that job's come up again. We can't be bothered to just go through the rigmarole of interviewing people. Do you want it? So I got it through not getting the job. Anyway, so I got this job at Noel Gay Television as an associate producer, and I'd also already booked a very expensive holiday somewhere in the Far East. And I said, I don't really feel like I can cancel this holiday. And they said, okay, that's fine. So you can start afterwards. And when I told this to Malcolm, he said, oh, fuck it, I could do that. I could do your job. And I said, don't be stupid, Malcolm. You'll never come in at time. You never come in at 9 o'clock and leave at 6 o'clock. And then I thought about it, and I thought, he knows everybody in alternative comedy. So if he phones up, they're going to do it for him. And so I mentioned to the executive producer about this, and he said, that's ridiculous. Malcolm will never keep it up. He'll never come in at 9 o'clock and leave at 6 o'clock. He's so irresponsible. And then he thought about it, and he thought, yeah, it might work. So I went off on this 3 or 4 week holiday while Malcolm did my job, and I came back. And Malcolm had just come in at 9 o'clock and left at 6 o'clock.
Wow!
and they kept us both on, so we basically knew each other from that. Shared a desk, I think. They gained tremendously from that, because if a TV producer or a TV researcher phones you up, he said, "Oh, some sort of wanker. God, he's untrustworthy. He's been to Oxford. He's a wanker."
Yeah, but if Malcolm phones you,
Malcolm phones absolutely. Oh no! If one of the producers or researchers phones you up and says, "I work for No Gay Television," at that point, they would think, "Hold on, that's the company Malcolm works for. They must be okay." Or if Malcolm phoned them up, they'd do it. So the company got kudos out of it, because Malcolm was actually working for them. So it was run
by real people. It was perceived to be, obviously, because Malcolm was a very real character, and like you say, it wasn't considered to be like a Footlights, Cambridge, Oxford kind of business.
Yeah. I mean, it was, of course, but it wasn't thought to be.
But it wasn't perceived to be. Yeah, that's what I was saying. Yeah, so that's really interesting.
So again, it's psychological perception, which is everything, really.
Yep.
I left. They annoyed me. I left No Gay, and there was a point in 1993 or 4, somewhere around there. Malcolm phoned me up. We weren't working together. Malcolm phoned me up and said, "Oi, I've got this contract to run my autobiography. I can't do it. You have to fucking do it." And I said, he said, 50-50. I'll give you 50-50 to write my autobiography. And I said, "That don't be ridiculous. You can write your own autobiography. I'll just sort of nudge you occasionally." So I said 90-10. You take 90, I'll take 10. And he said, no. So eventually what happened was he beat me down to 80-20 in his favour. I really wanted 90-10 in his favour. And he'd originally offered me 50-50. So clearly I'm not a good negotiator.
Yeah, I was just going to say, that's not the job for you.
No. So, and in fact, quite often since then, people have said "Oh, you should be an agent, or you should be a manager." And in fact, I could be a good manager, but I couldn't be a good agent, because I don't. If I can beat someone down and screw them financially, I don't get a hard on. This is
no, too honest.
Yeah, you have to. At my age, I'm lucky to get her. But you have to really get a kick. It's like being a performer. You have to get a kick out of it. And the kick out of being an agent is that you do a great deal, and you perhaps persuade people to have someone on that they don't want on at the highest possible rate.
And that doesn't do it for you.
No.
But just going back to Malcolm's book. So did you edit his book in the end, or you did?
Well, of course, what happened was he couldn't be bothered.
So did you write it, in fact?
Well,
pretty much.
Basically, it's interviews, basically. So every word in that book is Malcolm's words.
Right.
Say all the right words, not necessarily in the right
order.
And there was a very good review in the Manchester Evening News or something, said that when you read it, it was as if you were in the room with Malcolm and he was talking to you.
Oh, that's lovely.
I interviewed him over like about 9 months.
And what's the book actually called? It's
I Stole Freddie Mercury's Birthday Cake. And that was Malcolm's idea, totally. He came in one day and said, "I've got a title for the book. I stole Freddie Mercury's birthday cake." As indeed he did. And to give him his due, he did write, I think he wrote about the first page and a half or 2 pages of the book.
So hang on, let's backtrack a moment. So the book is called I Stole Freddie Mercury's Birthday Cake, and that's obviously based on a true story. So what's that story?
You'll have to buy the book to find out. The Greatest Show on Legs were booked to play for Freddie Mercury's, I think, 40th birthday party at some swank West End place. And they were very much, the hired help, just the people who were there to entertain people.
We should just say that the Greatest Show on Legs was Malcolm and 2 buddies that used to basically take their clothes off and do a balloon dance.
That's bit harsh, I think. When the Greatest Show on Legs, in fact, was Martin Sohn's act. Martin Sohn, wonderful comedian, used to have a seaside act where he did a Punch and Judy show. And if the show didn't go well, think of him, he's inside the booth. He just lifted the booth up and ran. The Great Show on Legs.
Ah, that's where that comes from.
And Malcolm encountered him at some point, probably out of prison or something. And I can't remember what it's called. I think it's called a Barker, is it? You have a sort of roll up, come to the Punch and Judy show. You have this person who gets all the people to come and sit on the stand and watch the Punch and Judy show. And so Malcolm was his sort of assistant in getting people in. And then they eventually became The Greatest Show on Legs, which was just a variety act. And usually 3 people, the third person tended to change. But in fact, all the creative things, in fact, were Martin Soane's. I mean, the balloon dance is Martin Soane's act. He came up with all the ideas. And there are also the red sparrows, which is you have men running around with sticks in their hand and little sparrows, red sparrows on the end, and they're doing the routines of the
red
RAF.
Arrows.
Yeah, and the naked balloon dance, if you actually look at it, is tremendously complicated, and it's all worked out by Martin Soane, because the whole idea of the greatest balloon dance is you get 3 men, they've got two balloons each, and they have to cover their modesty, they're naked, and so things happen there. One of the men will pop one of the other balloons, or one will deflate, and gradually you end up with no balloons. But at no point do you actually ever see the naughty bits.
It's very clever. It is hilarious. It must be on YouTube somewhere, surely, I reckon.
Well, the one to look for, because there are people just ripped it off,
yes, of course,
but they can't do it properly. There is the OTT performance, because they were on OTT, this older version of Tiswas, and they were sensational. If you ask anyone, if you ask any normal member of the public, do you know who Malcolm Hardy is? They'll say no, never heard of him. And you say naked balloon dance, OTT, and if they're of a certain age, they'll remember it. But they no knowledge of Malcolm. When Malcolm died, he got full-page obituaries in, I don't know, The Guardian, The Telegraph, all over the place. All the quality papers did big obituaries because people in the industry knew who he was. But he got nothing in the tabloids because the members of the public didn't know who he was. Anyway.
But of course, the thing that you did set up in his honour, once he did sadly pass away, are the Malcolm Hardy Awards. And so how long did they run in Edinburgh for? 10 years?
Yes, because what happened was I used to go up to Edinburgh a lot with TV companies and so on, and I would get free tickets. And there was a point where I wasn't getting free tickets, and I thought, how do you get free tickets to Edinburgh comedy shows? And I thought, you start awards.
It's
so
genius.
Malcolm had done. Yeah, and Malcolm had done this before, because when the Perrier Awards were big in Edinburgh, they were the big awards.
Yes.
He started the Tapwater Awards.
I did not know that.
And basically what he did was he gave the awards to his friends, so he didn't actually have to have any financial outlay.
Excellent.
But he got free tickets into everything. He said, "Well, come on, free tickets, go, free tickets." And so stealing my idea, as always, from Malcolm, I thought I'll set up awards in his memory, and not partly obviously to make sure he was remembered, but
yeah. And so, how many actual awards were there? There's.
Well, when I set them up, I thought I might run out of money at some point, which I have, and I thought I'll get 10 awards made. And that'll last me 10 years. And then if I'm still doing it, we'll have another 10 years or whatever.
Yeah.
And so I had the awards made by an eccentric I'd found for one of my TV shows. In fact, it was John Ward, who was an eccentric creator of things.
So basically, you got somebody called Ward to make the awards. So yes. You were giving away awards by award.
Yeah. And then at some point later on, the Fringe Awards outfit gave me an award for awarding these awards by award.
Excellent. Well, you can't get better than that, can you?
So there was originally one award, which was one award. Malcolm Hardy.
Yeah, just called the Malcolm Hardy Award. And then there was this very enterprising girl, but I remember it vividly. One of the few things I remember vividly, Jill Smith was her name. And she came to me and she said, I'm thinking of nominating myself for the Malcolm Hardy Award on the basis I can then put in my Fringe poster, Malcolm Hardy Award nominee. I think Malcolm would have approved. And I thought, yeah, he certainly would have approved. It's a great idea. And I thought, well, we better give her an award, otherwise she's going to give herself an award. So we might as well get in there first. And so we gave her an award for this brilliant idea, and I made up the idea of a Cunning Stunt Award. So she got the very first Cunning Stunt Award, which I think was in 2009, although it was for 2008. There was some reason, but I can't really remember.
That is a real that's a stroke of genius, isn't it? So just say, I'm just going to basically nominate myself.
Yeah.
And then it meant that you went ahead and created a whole genre of awards for her.
Yeah. And the whole of the Edinburgh Fringe is a lie, because they have all these posters, all these quotes on, which are for reviews of quotes of the previous year's shows. Sometimes 7 years ago show, whatever. So the whole of the Edinburgh Fringe is just bullshit on that sort of front. So it was a brilliant idea. It epitomised the Edinburgh Fringe, and Malcolm would have, if he'd thought of it, he would have done it as well.
Yeah, he'd have loved it.
And so then there came into being the Malcolm Hardie Award and the Cunning Stunt Award, and I thought, well, the Malcolm Hardie Award had better be called something else. It was the Malcolm Hardie Award for Comic Originality, it was then called. And then so then there were 2 awards. And then after a few years, I sat down and looked at the awards winners for previous years, and I thought, no one's heard of these people. In 10 years' time, they're going to sit down, look at these awards and not have heard of them. Because in order to get a Malcolm Hardie Comic Originality Award, you have to be severely weird. I mean, it has to be a real originality.
Yeah.
And real originality and weirdness of a kind that would get you a show at 8 o'clock on a Saturday night on BBC One.
But then it's, by their nature, they're not mainstream, are they? So
yeah. So by definition, these acts are not mainstream, and therefore, in 10 years' time, the average punter, who admittedly doesn't know who Malcolm Hardie is anyway, wouldn't know who these people are. I thought, how do I get famous names in 10 years' time on a list when people look back on them, and therefore get a bit of
kudos.
That's the very word. What a fine word it is too, and it's my word now. And so I thought, well, if you do the act most likely to win £1 million award, I thought. Obviously, £1 million is obviously in Malcolm's area. It's not £1 million, £1 million. Oh no, it's the act most likely to make £1 million, as opposed to win £1 million. It's the act most likely to make £1 million. I mean, Trevor Noah was a winner, who's now got his own chat show in America.
Well, he's incredible, isn't he?
Yeah, and the first one was, no, it wasn't. Bo Burnham we had early on. And we had a funny feeling Bo Burnham, who was an internet sensation, might actually have been a millionaire.
Already been a millionaire.
We were never too sure. Yeah, we were never. It was a severe possibility. We also had Bennett Brandreth, who's the son of
Giles.
Giles, yeah.
Yeah.
And he's a lawyer, and he's in some very specialist thing. I can't remember what it is. I think it's something like copyright law or something. And we thought, he's going to be a millionaire just out of being a lawyer. So even if he doesn't continue being a stand-up comic, he's going to be a millionaire.
I love the ambiguity. It's brilliant. It's so good.
Yeah. But one of the best awards was Ellis and Rose was an act. And that particular year, whenever it was, 2013, I think, they did a show called, I can't remember what it was called. Anyway, it involved Jimmy Savile. They were doing this show. Jimmy Savile was very controversial. And then so controversial that one night after the show, Ellis got beaten up in the street by an irate person who'd seen the show. How dare you do this comedy show about this awful person? And he had black eye, he had bruises, he had everything. He had terrible. He looked terrible. And so I did a blog about him, because I do a very, very interesting blog. I did a blog about him, and he got publicity in the evening news, the Scotsman, all over the place for this thing. Only a few lines, but sort of publicity you can't buy in Edinburgh at the Fringe time. And it turned out that, in fact, they'd faked this. And in fact, they'd done it for the publicity, because they thought, well, if Jimmy Savile was involved, and if he gets beaten up, that's newsworthy. So we'll get at least like 3 lines mentioning our show title, and therefore we'll get more people to come to the show. But in fact, when I say they faked it, they didn't fake it. What they did was Ellis and Rose beat up Ellis's face. He punched Ellis in the face full force. In the eye and everything to bruise him up. Pictures were then taken of this of the end result.
They were proper method then.
Yeah, so this was a cunning stunt, because the whole point about a cunning stunt is that they're not stunts. So getting 100 men with red hair to walk along Princes Street and filmed by American networks and things, it's not a cunning stunt. It's a stunt, but it's not cunning.
No,
and this was a cunning stunt. The best cunning stunts are things that either people don't know ever happened, or don't know ever happened until you tell them.
Yes.
And they'd taken the precaution of filming Rose beating up Ellis. So you actually saw him hitting him full force in the face.
Oh, my goodness.
And this proved to us, and all the judges, that in fact they weren't telling fibs. In fact, this was done for publicity purposes.
My goodness.
Someone else was getting the award that year, because it was obvious that the other person should get the award. And so we couldn't give them the Cunning Stunt Award. So I made up an award, which was the Malcolm Hardie Pound of Flesh Award, because they'd just beaten his face to pulp. That was almost the best award we ever did, because it was just so.
And was there just one of those?
Yeah, it was a one-off.
One-off.
Because the reason I can't remember, we couldn't give them the Cunning Stunt Award because it wasn't really fair, because someone had done a brilliant Cunning Stunt.
Right, yeah.
And so I for that 1 year, and for some other reason, I had a spare trophy. So at the end of 10 years, all this came to an end, and I ran out of money to do it all. There was, I think, a year without the Malcolm Hardie Awards, and then the British Comedy Guide online site, British Comedy Guide, took it over, and they did their 2019. They awarded awards, and then sadly 2020 no awards or no shows. So there you go.
Yeah, no shows. So so on that note, I thank you so much for joining me again, John. Take two, hooray! The main difference between the two interviews, really, dearest listener, is that the first one, really, apart from the wind, and that wasn't either of us, John or myself, it was nature's wind in a garden, and the fact that I just really felt that I sort of walked away not knowing in depth anything about you, John, which I feel like I do now. I feel like I do. Sorry, we haven't spoken about your blog, so we should.
It's called So It Goes. So if you were to Google John Fleming with one M, So It Goes, you could find it.
Yeah, and it is an amazing blog, because of your comedy connoisseurness, if that's a word. It's not. We know it's not. You meet so many different performers, cabaret, stand-up comics, alternative comics, and as you said, you were employed to find the weirdest and the most unusual acts, and you often interview them, and the blog is just full of interesting snippets of new acts and old acts and everything else besides, isn't it?
But interestingly, the highest hits don't come on the comedy side; they come on the crime side.
Crime.
Yeah. The one that constantly gets read is why the Craze movie Legend doesn't work, and the other one that always gets constant reviews is why you should never try and kill yourself by putting your head in the gas oven.
So you can check those out, listener.
those two get constant things, and then occasionally things flare up. In the last 3 weeks, there's been a lot of hits on the nude statue of Ariel on the outside of Broadcasting House. And someone said it's something to do with people looking up statues as if it's something to do with slavery. And also the word naked, I think, is in there. So the two together means people just hit them. Who knows? I thought you'd become sort of a detective writer when you said it's the crime ones that people look at. I thought, I didn't realise that. No, I've got a varied readership. I've got a lot of sort of low-key comedians in Britain, lots of Essex boys and Essex girls who want to be criminals, and I've got all sorts of people in America. And anyway, it's a strange readership. I have to keep them all together.
It's worth checking it out.
Can I put my clothes back on now?
Yes, John, you can. I think it's best. So thank you so much for joining me on Real Folk, and I do feel like we've actually managed to find out who the real John Fleming is, and not just talk about all the famous comedians and people that have crossed his path over the years. And hopefully we'll all see you back up in Edinburgh, and 2021 will lead to many more Malcolm Hardie Awards.
Thanks for listening to Real Folk with me, Jo Burke.